Hello and welcome to CNBC Africa's special broadcast of the foremost panel session leading discussions at the Made in Togo-European Union Economic Forum in Lomé. I am CHRISTY Cole. In this one-hour panel conversation moderated by the Director, Center for Development of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Mario Pezzini, economists and investors, including Etienne Giros, President of the European Business Council for Africa, Carlos Lopez, the former Executive Secretary of the United Nations Executive Commission for Africa, and Africa's richest man and President of the Dangote Group, Aliko Dangote, discuss inclusive and sustainable development for Togo.
I'm Mario Pezzini. I'm the director of the International Development Center of the OECD. I'm very happy to be here with you and with all my friends with whom we discuss regularly. But now we're going to do it with you to discuss this very important topic. I'm going to introduce them to you, but you all know them. Every time I will ask questions to them, you all know them very well. The theme is inclusive, sustainable development for Togo, a theme that is very important. This is actually a general debate for the world economy that comes from a political will. We have heard it within the speech of the President just earlier. We have themes, economic issues like slow growth of the economy. You have the European Union initiatives, European Africa. We heard that in the speech of the President, but also the new development consensus from the European Union that shows new guidelines to improve international cooperation. This is an international matter. You have local initiatives. The National Development Plan has also been underlined in the President's speech. So in this general context, where do we actually put Africa and especially Togo? It is obviously that the economic slowdown globally is not happening at the same pace in the different regions. In Asia, for example, you have 5 to 6% growth. In Latin America, it's hard to be at 1%. Africa is just between those two continents. But within the international context, with huge opportunities for development, I would like to start this debate to ask Carlos Lopez to what is actually the public action that is actually done on this matter. Why am I asking to Carlos? Because not only his intellectual abilities, initiatives, etc. He was the executive director of the UNECA. So within these general themes, he will be able to give us the views around all those challenges. Thank you, Mario. I thank you, all of you, everybody, especially the President of Togo, to have really presented the development issues of Togo in his speech. There are big trends for the development of Africa. You have the issues of demography, climate, technology. Within those three trends, we have to access it.
Celui qui a la courbe démographique la plus importante, le taux d'urbanisation le plus soutenu, etc. Donc nous avons vraiment des défis énormes pour création d'emplois, absorption d'une jeunesse qui est vraiment représentative non seulement comme un bien public africain, mais un bien
Regarding
public
the demography, we are the youngest
avec
population
le vieillissement de la
in the
population.
world, with also urbanization that is very high. we really have huge challenges in terms of creating jobs, giving jobs to that youth that represents the African continent, basically. More and more, with the worldwide population that is getting older, we have a reservoir in Africa with the young people.
Un continent qui participe à la solution du changement climatique. Et là, par exemple, nous voyons utilisation d'énergies renouvelables, industrialisation par un retardataire dans la matière.
Regarding the climate, Africa is suffering the most of it, but where we have a lot of potential, especially in the energy sector and also the transforming sector, which is possible now due to the industrialization. We need to go from the stages we are now adapting to climate, where we actually participate to the change of climate. We have to use renewable energies. The new industrialization needs to adopt new technologies so that we can adapt ourselves to the climate.
Des caractéristiques spécifiques du continent. Donc, dans chacun de ces méga-tendances, il y a des possibilités.
Africa is always seen as late regarding the technological development. The innovation is concentrated in only few centers in the world, but we forget that Africa, with its youth, can adapt faster than other regions in the world, because we have this digital native that becomes more and more African due to the age of the population and its specificities. So in all of these trends, you have opportunities and you have challenges. We see at the moment more the challenges than the opportunities. Why? Because the countries need to do a lot of reforms and to actually go faster in order to catch up on the opportunities. So we can divide the countries in two categories. The people who make reforms and people who just live on rent. You have 35 countries in maybe countries in Africa who only depending on the raw material, who actually not transforming. And you have other countries that you can actually do reforms quite fast. And they're entering another category, which is, we see actually more the opportunities. So that is the situation on the ground. So I think that Togo is actually more on the reforming side than on the rent side.
Qui sont relativement importants, notamment le fait que le Togo a le taux de chômage le plus bas de l'Afrique de l'Ouest et un des plus bas d'Afrique. Voilà un peu le cadre.
I would like to move to Aliko Dangote. Aliko is the private sector of Africa. He's one of the most, if not the most important businessmen of Africa, and he's working in 14 different countries, and therefore he has a view about what is the situation. Now, just following the words of Carlos, Africa has a lot of opportunity. The young people can carry the old people on the shoulder because they are in a large number now, and therefore the old, like me, are a little bit lighter than in the past. But these people need to find activities, jobs, to use their potential. Now, sometimes the rental attitude of certain countries and activities is not the answer. It's true that Africa can do more in terms of mining and extraction of energy, but it's also true that these are sectors with a marginal productivity in the long term, so they cannot offer that much new jobs. More exploration can be conducted in Africa, if I am not wrong. $5 per square kilometer are invested in exploration, whilst in Australia 60. So more can be done. But that's not the answer. It's maybe part of the answer. One needs to look for other type of activity. And we will see what the private sector from other countries can do in terms of foreign direct investment in a second with a third speaker. But with you, I would like to say it's obvious that the solution needs to come from Africa. And it's obvious that the solution needs to use all the energies that exist in Africa in entrepreneurial terms, but also in skills that can be developed, thanks also to the young age that allow people to run faster. So, under your point of view, looking from the private sector, what needs to be reformed? What are the priorities that would help using these capacities? And in particular, when it comes to Togo, we see this port is a major asset. Is it the only one? What other sectors could be developed?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to congratulate His Excellency, the President, for his visionary, this in terms of having a lot of reforms here in Togo, and apart from that, putting this kind of Togo-European Union Forum. And I must congratulate you, Your Excellency, for having this kind of forum, because this is what can actually attract foreign investment. Things have actually changed. You don't really now deal with government to government. What drives the engine of growth is private sector. And you are right, yes, Togo, first of all, let me talk about Africa. When you look at it today, the highest growing economies today, out of 10, 6 are in Africa. That's number one. Number two, despite the slowness in terms of growth, you can see, first of all, Togo has about 6% growth in their own economy since 2008, and they've been able to sustain that. They actually could do more. In Africa, we have average of about 5% growth. The only one that is much more than Africa is Southern Asia, with about 6 to 7% growth. So the opportunities here, when you look at it, you can read all sorts. I can stay here and be telling you what and what, but I'm sure you have all read about Africa. So there's quite a lot that we can actually do here in Africa. You are right. Togo is like a position of Singapore. You need to say, okay, fine, yes, I don't have the population, but then you have a bigger market. You have the ECOWAS. By the time that we sign the CFTA, you have now the larger African market. So with the kind of, security which you have here in Togo, you have the legal infrastructure, you have also the infrastructure in terms of the port. I mean, the deepest port that you can find today in West Africa is here in Togo. And, I mean, I was telling somebody that we're building a refinery in Nigeria, and the refinery that we're building, we're now faced with about 118,000 containers to be shipped to Nigeria, and our ports could not handle that. So majority of those containers are actually coming down to Togo, and then they are now going to be transshipped down to Nigeria. So that's one of the things that they have. But for Togo now, when you look at it, they need to face agriculture. They need to face agriculture. They need to face agriculture. Why I say so? Because they have the land, they have the climate, they have the water. All whatever they can produce here, they can take it around the other. Even the ECOWAS market is enough. It's about 315 million population. So really, they don't really need to go too far. Their market is here in West Africa. And if we sign the CFTA, then it's quite large. Let me go into other areas like phosphate. When you look at phosphate, Togo has one of the best. Togo should actually be producing fertilizer. They should not. I advise that they should not take their raw materials out there to be processed. Because the biggest challenge that we have in Africa is that we are used to exporting our raw materials to be processed elsewhere. You can see a typical example of cocoa today. 2 countries in West Africa, they produce 2/3 of cocoa, which is Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Out of this, they only earn what? They only earn about 6-8 billion at the highest, depending on the price of that year. 6 to 8 billion is nothing compared to chocolate market, which is $100 billion. So you can see the massive difference. If you are exporting raw material, you will not really make much enough. So Togo needs to go and say, okay, fine, what do we do now? One of the things that they need to do is to make sure that they do what you call import substitution. Import substitution, they should be producing what they consume and also exporting the excess. Because it is not sustainable when they are having imports of about 8 billion and export of about 2-point-something billion. That's not sustainable. But for it to be sustainable, they need to make sure that, yes, they improve much in terms of, investment code, which they have done. If there's any improvement, I'm sure with the way that I know His Excellency the President, he can change at any time and redefine what they believe that they can attract a lot of investors, which other neighboring countries might not be able to. If they do that, then the sky is the limit. With this deep sea port, they need to make sure that the corridor going to this road network going to other landlocked countries like Burkina Faso, they need to make sure that that's done quickly. And I'm sure they can get quite a lot of investors. I'm not saying that government should invest their money, but there are investors that can be given concessions where they can charge a toll, and it will be a win-win situation. Government will take the credit, and the entrepreneurs will make the money. And the entrepreneurs, at the end of the day, they will pay taxes. So it's like government is owning that same infrastructure. If you look at it today, you will be wondering, okay, fine, what could an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur can do quite a lot. Let me give you an example of what we are doing. Today, we have, within the last 10 years, built 50 million tons of cement capacity. Okay, and we know that, yes, we realize that, look, a country like ours, Nigeria, is importing almost 98% of our petroleum products, which is also the case here in Togo. They are importing almost 100%, and most of the West African countries. So we decided to take a very bold step by spending about $14 billion to do, refinery and petrochemical. We are now doing 650,000 barrels per day refinery. Yes, there are a lot of challenges, but it is possible, and will be commissioning by next year, with about 1.3 million tons of polypropylene, polyethylene, all in the same site. We realize also Nigeria imports fertilizer, which does not really make sense. We have natural gas, we can do urea and ammonia, and we are also commissioning this year our urea and ammonia, which is 3 million tons, which is by far in excess of Nigeria's consumption. It's far in excess of West African consumption. Okay, so we need to now target like America, South America, or Latin America's market. Okay, so it could be done, but this thing has to be a partnership between government and private sector. What I would have loved to see in terms of this partnership between Togo and European Union is to now say, okay, fine, we do like AGOA, where they allow Togo to produce all the garments that are possible to be exported to Europe. Togo produced one of the best cottons in the world.
The wax, we see the result.
Cotton, yes. So if they produce cotton, the only thing that they need to do is not only to export cotton, they should either export the yarn, or they should export garments which are needed all over the world. They should take to Europe, they should take to America. This is why now you can have an inclusive growth. So the farmers will make quite a lot of money growing the cotton, and there's a ready market to produce garments. They don't really have to now go through the crisis of ups and downs of cotton prices, because that's just a raw material. So we need to look at all these things. But by the time that Togo put all these things, I am 100% sure that Togo will need a lot of their neighbors to come up and send more people to get jobs here. So it is very simple, it is easy. I know that people will say, well, how? But these are the issues. Togo has a much larger market. People should stop looking at the population of Togo. They should look at the population of ECOWAS or Africa in general. That's where, I believe that, we can have.
Thank you, Aliko. And the idea is very clear. You see the applause. Togo needs to have an area of action and also of analysis which is wider than the country itself and define its special assets that can serve this wider area.
To come back about investment regarding the Europe. It's easy to say when you walk in Lomé or in other cities in West Africa, to see that there's so many entrepreneurs that are working very hard every day. It's not a lack of entrepreneurship or energy. This idea that people are not performing because they are lazy, it's totally not applicable here. You just have to look at it when you walk in the streets of Africa. But there are more and more analysts saying that what is lacking, it's a lack of public infrastructure. The entrepreneurs don't have what they need to actually exercise the entrepreneur spirit. So let's take the point of view of an entrepreneur from Europe. And Etienne Giros, who is the president of the European Consortium of Business. So what are the actions that we can do on the European side or the African side just to facilitate, to actually improve the infrastructure that are actually not working that well? Thank you very much, Mario. Mr. President, good morning to everybody. I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you for organizing this forum because it's focused on the private sector. I mean, I represent, I'm the president of EPCAM, who gathers the European private sector, but also the French companies who invest in Africa. It's very big and it's very important. The fact that the private sector, and the president underlined that, and this is very positive for us because we all have to accept that we can only create wealth through the private sector, through the companies. It's not all the other actors. Everybody has this role, but the companies are actually, and the private sector, create wealth. So everything that contributes to actually create value, the entrepreneur spirit, all of that is very positive. We are fighting for that on a daily basis. And we have seen that Togo has taken a lot of measures on that regard. The industrialization is so important for Africa. The other day I was asked, but finally, does Africa need to industrialize? Or can Africa not specialize just directly in the tertiary sector? And that's a theory that exists. For example, the British were going to develop low factory activities. Some French group as well will say, okay, we are going to have activities without factories. I don't agree with this. I think Africa needs to industrialize no matter what. A country like Togo needs to industrialize to actually create the jobs that its population needs. And why not industrialize while letting the industrialization in other side of the world and not here? We need to help the local entrepreneurs as well as the foreign entrepreneurs to actually make sure that we reach that stage.
Et de l'Afrique de l'Ouest et du Togo qu'on a cité tout à l'heure, qui est assez évident, je ne reviendrai pas dessus. J'insisterai simplement sur la nécessité absolue d'aller vite. Je pense que nous sommes dans une course contre la montre. Il y a une croissance démographique telle.
When you look at the potentialities in Africa,
nous avons devant nous un défi énorme et nous n'avons pas de temps.
I would like that it's so important that we are on a race against time. The demographic issues is so important. We have 20 million people arriving on the job market. We have a huge challenge to achieve. We don't have time to lose.
Et on nous cite toujours la vigueur des entrepreneurs et des entreprises chinoises, ou même la vigueur des entrepreneurs africains eux-mêmes, africains de l'Ouest ou marocains par exemple. Cette frilosité
Cautious about investing in Africa.
des entreprises
We always think about the Chinese investment
et je pense que
or the African
pour y
entrepreneurs.
répondre, il faut traiter 3 obstacles qui se dressent devant eux. Le premier,
This,
c'est le climat des
the
affaires.
fact that
Vous ne
the
pouvez
European
pas
entreprises are a bit
demander à un
cautious
entrepreneur
in
européen d'investir en Afrique
not
s'il ne
coming
sent
to
pas un climat
invest in
relativement
Africa
positif. Vous
is a
ne prenez pas
reality,
sur mes
but
propos, je ne
we need
demande pas
to
à un
look at
entrepreneur de
3
pas prendre de risque.
aspects.
C'est dans sa nature
First
même.
one is
L'entrepreneur
the
doit prendre un risque
business
industriel.
climate
En revanche,
that
un
needs
climat
to be
relativement
addressed.
favorable,
The European
climat
Union is
positif
not
pour les
going to, the
entreprises,
European entrepreneurs are not going to
stabilité
invest
fiscale.
in Africa
Je ne
if
parle
the
pas du
climate
niveau de
is not
l'imposition.
right.
Je parle du fait que la taxation doit être égale pour tous.
Even though every
Une
entrepreneur
justice qui
needs
peut permettre de
to
résoudre les conflits commerciaux.
take any risks,
Et
and that's the same for
finalement,
the
une
local
image
entrepreneurs.
positive du secteur privé, c'est
Fiscal
très important.
stability,
Il y a une deuxième chose qui regarde,
extremely
c'est
important.
les infrastructures.
Taxation
Le
needs to be
président en a
equal for
parlé tout à
everybody.
l'heure. Vous en avez aussi
The
parlé.
judicial sector
Je sais que la mode est beaucoup à parler du digital, de la jeunesse, de la nouvelle économie,
is the
etc.
same for everybody.
Très bien, mais très bien.
True.
Mais n'empêche que
And then the
il faut
third
de
aspect that is
l'électricité,
very important
il
is
faut des
infrastructure.
routes, il faut des réseaux de
We
communication,
all spoke about
il
it.
faut des systèmes de santé et il faut
We're
un
talking
système
about
énergétique.
digital, we're
Nous
talking
plaidons
about
aussi
youth,
beaucoup pour ce deuxième critère.
very
Et
good.
puis il y en a un troisième,
But
si vous permettez Mario, que je
we
vais
need
mettre en
power,
avant,
we need
et celui de
roads,
la taille des marchés.
we need
Et
telecom,
ça, la
we need
réponse, c'est
healthcare,
l'intégration régionale.
and we need
Les marchés
a good
africains,
educational
pris
system.
pays
So
par
we are
pays,
advocating
sont d'une
for
taille
those things.
relativement modeste.
And then
Et quand un
third
investisseur
trend
regarde un marché,
is also the size of the market.
finalement, est-ce que je vais investir dans ce pays?
To respond to
Il
the
regarde
size of
la
the
taille de
market,
l'investissement, il regarde
integration,
le climat des affaires.
regional integration
Si
is
la
key.
taille est relativement
If you take
modeste,
every
qu'il la compare
country in Africa, those markets are small, but
élevé,
if you integrate them
il le fera
regionally,
pas. Et donc, il faut
that's what
sortir
matters. An entrepreneur looks
de
at
la
the investment,
dualité
he looks
terrible,
at the
je
business
trouve, pour
climate,
les investisseurs, de comparer
he looks at
la
the
taille
size
du
of the
marché
market,
avec la perception
then he
du
looks at the
risque.
risk.
Quand vous êtes un comité d'investissement,
Then he's
dans
not
les
going to
boutiques
come.
immobilières,
So we need to
on vous
actually
présente un investissement à 20 ou 40 millions d'euros et que vous regardez quel est le potentiel. 3 millions, 4 millions de consommateurs.
we need to get out
un
of
chiffre d'affaires
the
relativement
perception
modeste. Et en face,
of
une
comparing
perception du risque
the size of the
qui est
market
modeste.
versus
La
the risk.
décision ne se fait en général pas en faveur du
When you on investment committee,
Il faut
we
absolument
are
casser
presenting you an investment. You look at the investment, you look at the potential. If you bring your 20 to 30 million investment, you look at 2, 3 million consumers, about climate business. We just refuse it, we turn the page, and we look at a new investment opportunity. Mr. President spoke about it earlier, spoke about the size of the market, but underline the regional integration.
Il faut qu'il y ait des clients en face pour l'amortir. Et donc, il faut agrandir le marché. Quant à la perception du risque, on peut en reparler peut-être après dans un deuxième tour, mais un seul mot, il faut dérisquer l'Afrique. L'Afrique, elle n'est pas plus risquée que d'autres continents, pas plus. Et par ailleurs, elle a évidemment des risques, il faut dire la vérité. Ça n'est pas un long fleuve tranquille. Il y a des difficultés, des obstacles.
We all hope that the EFCTFA, with the free trade agreement that will come through in July, will actually be a progress to facilitate trade between the countries.
You have been watching CNBC Africa's special broadcast of the panel discussion on inclusive and sustainable development for Togo at the Togo-European Union Economic Forum 2019 in Lomé. After the break, the panelists will take the conversation further and explore reforms targeting Africa's transformation and industrialization. Welcome back. You have been watching CNBC Africa's special broadcast of the foremost panel discussion on inclusive and sustainable development for Togo at the Togo-European Union Business Forum in Lomé. On the second half of discussions, the panelists explore opportunism in Africa and focus on transformation, industrialization, and beneficiation.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Mr. President. We start to see a number of answers that are converging together. Carlos is underlining the optimism towards Africa. Carlos is telling us that we have to be careful and get out of a renting logic and reform Africa and to actually be very productive in transformation the raw material. We need to have a vision that identifies the assets not only at the stage of a country, but mostly towards integration of the region. I'm going to do a second round of questions to look at things differently. How are we going to finance this? The international is not the best at the moment. We would think that the aid and cooperation, we could think that the aid for development and cooperation for development could increase, but actually they are decreasing. If you look at the figures, it has decreased compared to the previous year. And it's not always going to the countries that need the most. So, what about the remittances fees from the diaspora, which is the second source of financing? And so, like as well, the remittance is not very clear about how to finance the development. Foreign direct investment could also be a good source, but it's not enough. So we need public policies. What can we do?
Aliko Dangote,
I'm not going to try to tease Aliko Dangote, but his wealth is 2 times the Togolese economy. His refinery is twice the Togolese economy. So there is money in Africa. Somebody like Aliko Dangote, like the latest study of Afri-Asia Bank, shows that there is $920 billion with people owning wealth in Africa. If you look at the pension fund, have 1,000 billion of dollars. If you look at the tax sector, we have the lowest tax position in the world, around 17%. The world average on tax is 35%. We just need to increase from 17 to 18% the fiscal imposition, so we can have more money than the entire aid for development. So yes, the fiscal sector needs to actually get better.
À 600 plus milliards de dollars actuellement. Donc la fiscalité, c'est la réponse, c'est pas l'aide
Fiscal
publique au
revenues
développement.
have improved. We went from $163 billion from 2000 to more than $600 billion actually. So the fiscal issues are actually the response to this challenge. We have money on the continent, and obviously we're interested to bring money from different international sources. So if we look at Europe, is the first investor in Africa, and this is often mentioned. The problem is that it's not increasing. That trend is not increasing. There's less and less European investment compared to other, for example, China, UAE, Turkey, and India, South Korea, and Japan as well. So we have a stock of investment that is quite well consolidated, that is actually mostly European, but which is not increasing. So the question of risk is also coming here. And how can we actually access this and assess these risk issues? So the most important message is it's not a problem of money available. There is a lot of money available in Africa, who is actually going out of the continent. I'll give you a striking example from this month. The Central Bank of South Africa authorized agreed to transfer quotation of Naspers to Amsterdam. Naspers placed $120 billion in Amsterdam. We looked at the statistics of the Knesset with all the investment that came into Africa last year, and it's around 40 billion that came into Africa. So one operation that authorized by African regulator took $120 billion out of the continent. So you can see the balance. It's a question of having the good policies, not about talking about opportunities.
Merci, Carlos. Ça me permet d'aller, it allows me to go 1 mile further and to say, okay, therefore, in many cases, financial resources are there, but still there is an issue that they have to go where they are needed. And so how banks, local banks, operate, how they provide the financial support to the many initiatives that exist. So I don't think that there is a better person than Aliko to address this issue. Is the system functioning well at the local level? How do you perceive the financing of initiatives, African initiatives, in the continent?
Well, thank you very much. I think one of the biggest issue and challenge that we have is actually lack of domestic banks. Because if you don't have domestic banks, you have international banks opening branches and co. It is a bit difficult for them to assist the local entrepreneurs to be able to leapfrog. Okay, because there's this, what you call, even there's the European Union or generally worldwide, when they look at Africa, they look at that same perceived risk is still there. Okay, there's nothing that does not have a risk. Even now, coming, you've all arrived safe, but nobody is sure that, yes, you're 100% sure you are returning safe if you are flying. So, there's a risk in every single aspect of life. But I think in Africa it's more of a perceived risk. If now, let me give you an example. Even today, when we now rolled out a project of almost about $18 billion, out of the $18 billion, we're actually going to end up funding maybe 65% of that money at the end of the day. There's nowhere in the world that you go and you have this sort of, lack of leverage. You need to leverage to be able to leapfrog. But in Africa, what we need to do is mainly to support and make sure that we create our own local banks. The local banks can help and assist the indigens faster. Why does it have to be the indigen? It is very difficult for us to sit here as Africans and we believe that, yes, either Europeans or Americans are the ones that can come and create our economy. We have to do it ourselves. Africans must lead in this trajectory by opening up, by creating their own economy. It's true. Do we have the funding? No, we don't. But if we don't have them, we need a partnership. We need partners from Europe. There's nothing. There's no European company that can just jump into Togo and say that, yes, I want to do my own business. They would like to partner with a local person. But even if Togo doesn't have a local person, Togo is in a bigger market. It's an ECOWAS, it's part of ECOWAS. I am also, by definition, a Togolese because I carry a ECOWAS passport. Like today now, I came from Nigeria, but I came with only an ID. I didn't come with even passport. I came with ECOWAS ID, which is good enough. So I think we need to deepen and make sure that, yes, these are our regional markets, they work, and then the CFTA will be signed, and then we will now have a much larger market. The perceived risk of people thinking that, yes, it's not going to work, it will work, because I've not seen any company, any serious company that has opened business, and they claim that, yes, they've gone bankrupt, and they lock that business, or they close down the business and go back. There's quite a lot. There's a market that I think you can actually drive from. If Togo does not have, because that's the specific thing that we're discussing today about Togo. If Togo doesn't have that big market, please think about the ECOWAS market, and which is by far much larger than, which is 20 times, more than 20 times the Togolese population, because you need the market. This is where you can produce things, you have your own market, and the infrastructure is there. I cannot really fault. I told you that this port that they have is not even operating at 40% capacity as we speak today. So there's more business that could actually, open. One of the areas that you can look at, you can invest in an industrial park, which I think is part of the national development plan that the president has. The industrial one or the agri-based business can also be there. Number one, when you look at Togo, okay, fine, what do you think that Togo can do? Togo can do quite a lot in agriculture. And what I keep saying, for us to now be able, especially in Africa, to take most of these youth and give them jobs, we need to concentrate on agriculture, because we have 60% of the world's arable land. We have the best, we have the best climate. Whatever you can grow, when you look at the world map, whatever you can grow in Brazil could actually be grown here in Africa. So we have what it takes. The only problem that we have is this perceived risk. That's number one. Number two, people are always waiting to see that, look, let these Africans lead in terms of investment, then we will follow. But you can also partner. You can partner with Africans. You don't have to come on your own.
Ben, on a deux morceaux additionnels. C'est très important, je pense, le point qu'il faisait Carlos. En tout cas, il m'a.
I just remember that I was watching something yesterday when I was preparing this conference. When you look at the ratio between tax and the GDP, in South America, it's a bit better than Africa, like Carlos was saying. And for example, Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina have a rate on GDP which is around the OECD averages. And we think that Africa is worse. But no, I've looked at the data. And in Tunisia is 31%, in South Africa is 29%, in Chile it's at 24%. So we see that this willingness to reorganize the public finances are happening, and it's possible. and being a source to finance the public infrastructure. What is also important to mention is the PPP that are not only African. So I've already asked the questions basically. When we talk about risking, what's the way forward? In Africa, the money is not lacking. We have a lot of money in Africa. We talk about the pension firm, $1,000 billion. Banks in Africa are very liquid, and still we have issues financing investment. We have to look at two different types of actors. We have international group, the multinationals from Europe, from Africa, and then you have the SMEs. And if we agree that we need to industrialize and wealth creation, we need to help the SMEs. And it's so difficult to actually support the SMEs. Let's also speak about the informal sector, which we have not spoken about. So within this situation, the entrepreneurs face too many issues. First of all, the price of money is very high. An SME needs to get into debts to the banks to average rate of 15%. So let's imagine what type of returns you can expect on the investment at 15%. Then you have also you have to pay a tax on top of it. So I'm not sure that we need to increase taxes considering this whole situation. So we have to fight against that. 15%, the money is very expensive. So we're going to ask then the entrepreneur of SME, we're going to ask him guarantees. Whether it's a small group or SME are extremely hard to find. The multinational can give corporate guarantees from their mother company, but a small entrepreneur, he can give his house, but at some point he cannot give those guarantees anymore. So you have high interest rates, you have those guarantees, and it's created by the fact that it's the perceived risk of Africa. So the cost of the perceived risk of Africa, so we need to actually de-risk Africa. It's so essential for the economy. So how can we do it? First, let's de-risk Africa by bringing those interest rates down and organize a new partnership between the private sector and the international financial community. There is a lot of money sent to Africa. Like, for example, the European Investment Fund, the Fed, that has $30 to $32 billion for 3 to 4 years. As a private sector representative, we could actually cooperate better between the international financial community and the private sector. There should be a better cooperation so that companies can also be financed. They can also be included in working on those plans, working on projects, and make sure that actually those companies can go and see those financial institutions and present the projects. Presenting the project, for example, presenting the factory, it cost me 5 to 10 million, and present the projects to the financial community. So If this can happen just quickly and easily, we would much appreciate it. The rhythm of the international financial institution is not the same as the rhythm of the entrepreneurs. On one side it's very slow, and on the other side you need quick responses. There's a lot of bureaucracy. If you look at the Chinese, they sometimes come with a 100% financial option. With the European side, we're more on the partnership with different actors. And partner with financing, so it's not one finance option, it's different financing options. And that's when the issue started. When you have the World Bank with the European Bank and other financial institutions, it takes a year. In the meantime, we've not created jobs, we've not created wealth, and we're wasting time. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for watching CNBC Africa's special broadcast of the foremost panel discussion on inclusive and sustainable development for Togo at the Togo-European Union Economic Forum 2019 in Togo. Thank you for joining us. I am CHRISTY Cole.